Lindsay Hoyle has blocked the release of emails he sent to Israeli politicians. Responding to a Freedom of Information request lodged by Declassified UK, the UK government said Hoyle was the individual who had chosen not to release written correspondence since October 2023 between himself and the Israeli embassy, Labour Friends of Israel, and members or officials of the Knesset. The response said that Hoyle has formed the reasonable opinion that disclosure of the information would be likely to prejudice the effective conduct of public affairs. Oh, you think that, do you? Might the release of these emails show your loyalty to Israel, or at least a pro-Israel bias that you don't want the public seeing? This is a string of instances where Hoyle has shown his bias toward Israel. Back in 2023, he visited Israel on a solidarity visit, but no solidarity to the Palestinians who are facing a genocide. Remember when he intervened on the SNP's opposition day, where they called for a ceasefire at a time when Labour barely even wanted to utter those words? It's pretty disgraceful that we have a sitting speaker where no one challenges his seat is openly batting for Israel. A shock. I mean, again, we're not surprised at Lindsay's allegiances here, but what he's hiding could be significant, maybe even damning. In your estimation, how deep does the Israeli lobby go?
Pretty deep. I think, look, also let's remember that Lindsay Hoyle's father was a founding member of Labour Friends of Israel. I think on both sides of the Atlantic, you're seeing this real reckoning. I don't know if people have been following the newest stuff that's happening on the MAGA right. And I think Israel is more afraid of the MAGA right than they are the left. It's similar to this. This is like small fry, because Britain is a failed state, and it's like hanging on the coattails for desperation of the American empire. It's like they're sending ships to the South China Sea while like 1 million children last year stood in bread lines. I mean, it's not a serious country. Israel doesn't have to do much to have a lot of state capture in this country. Two things here. There was a time, Britain and America helped create Israel because at the time, for a series of reasons, Israel was a strategic, it's like having a military base in this choke point between Africa and Asia. When that empire was crumbling, and they found this resource, oil. And so it was about controlling oil. It was about geopolitics. It was about, having one of your people there. And that was how it was sold from day one. If you read the early documents, it's very clear that was a military base. That was in their interest, whatever. Now, and this is a controversial thing on the left, and it's up for debate, people like Adam Mania and Andreas Malm don't necessarily agree with them. I really respect them. And there's other people who see these changes happening. Is that part of the disjuncture and the tension, the contradiction between the interests of the empire, which is America and Britain, which is having Israel, is now slowly weaning, right? Because it's like it isn't in the interests of Britain and America, the empire, the Western Empire. America really, and Britain kind of whatever. It isn't in their interest that Israel murders children every day and slaughters people and starves people to death. Like, that's not actually in their interest. That's interest in a genocidal, fascistic settler state that needs to constantly expand, and fascism is at its core. Absolutely. And we see that over and over again. And Patrick Wolf's work on this is excellent. It's nothing new. Israel is an extreme and grotesque example of what you found in America when it was a settler, when it was exterminating the indigenous people here, or Australia and other places, right? The issue is that because Israel requires the support through diplomatic support, through financial support, through arms, whatever, it requires the support specifically of America and to a much lesser extent Britain and Germany. That means that disjuncture, the gulf between the imperial need for Israel to be Israel and actually Israel's liability is paid through hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying, hundreds of millions of dollars of basically bribery, paying officials off, paying for elections. And I would point to, and again, this is still out there, and I don't want to seem like some wacky crank, the debate that's happening in the MAGA right now, in the base of the MAGA right, which is really very, very fierce, and it's tearing it apart. And this is people like Tucker Carlson's leading this, and Candace Owens, and like Nick Fuentes, and all these people who represent really the right to varying degrees, and have always been quite critical, or mostly been critical. Candace Owens a bit recently, but critical of Israel. are focusing on the Jeffrey Epstein case. And the reason why that's relevant here is because there is, with a lot of evidence, because Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Lord Maxwell, was one of the leading spies in the country, and lots of evidence that he was killed by Mossad, and that they were introduced to each other. And there's loads of evidence to support the case that lots of this was about developing compromat material on elected officials. The reason why it's tearing them apart, and the reason why Congress, and this is articulated by the congressional majority leader, is that the reason why they closed Congress down 2 weeks early is because Democrats had proposed the Epstein Disclosure Act, which would have, with Republicans actually, to disclose all of the 10,000 video footage that Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, that to release that to the public, and Trump is refusing to release that. And so there's this idea, born in a lot of evidence, that he may have been basically an Israeli a Mossad official. Ghislaine Maxwell might have been as well, and they were gathering compromat material on very famous people. And that's why they closed down the U.S. Congress weeks early, so they don't have to see that bill. The bill will come up when Congress opens up again after a session, after the recess period's over. And the reason why I tell you this vignette isn't because I'm trying to speculate wildly. Of course, this is still speculation. It's that the right holds an enormous amount of power, way more than the left, in terms of what its influence is, especially in American politics now. And that's why when Netanyahu came to America, he spent 3 days there. 1 day with Trump and all congressional politicians, and 2 days attempting to meet with right-wing influencers, because they can see that the right-wing influencers, and that's why they went on the Naut Boys, and that was highly controversial, even for the right. And then they went on a tour trying to assuage everybody and say, no, we didn't mean anything by this, and they've apologized since. The reason why it's so important is if the right, this traditional base, collapses, in this country, it's represented by people like Tommy Robinson, who's already a marginal character. These are institutionally right characters. Like Tucker Carlson had a show on Fox News. Candace Owens has millions and millions of followers. They're not like a cokehead who's basically a mess, which is what Tommy Robinson, it was paid by Israel. The fact that it's collapsing in the right in the U.S. is terrifying for Zionists in Israel. And in some ways, I think, to some extent, they're trying to do everything now. Kill as many Palestinians, starve out Gaza, occupy Gaza, murder as many people, and occupy as much as West Bank, because they know the time is limited. The geriatrics are dying, the boomers are dying. As they die off, the left hates them, the right hates them, and the Democrats also are being squeezed effectively, and the Republicans are being squeezed. And so it's becoming a case that Israel is a massive, massive liability. And the fact that Israel isn't actually necessarily as much as the imperial interest as it was 50 years ago. And so hundreds of millions of dollars isn't going to make up for that gulf. And so, and even if with the election of Zoran Mamdani, I mean, you have 70% of Jews in New York that just came out. That 70% of Jews in New York support Zoran Mamdani. So even amongst young Jewry, there isn't really a support for, they'll say, the Netanyahu government. It's only going to move to the right in Israel. That's the contradiction. People don't understand. It's not moving to the left. It's moving to the right. And so on this Lindsay Hoyle question, and it's a circular argument, of course there's state capture, and it might come in many different forms. It can come in money, it can come in compromat. And I'm not saying compromat is in, oh my God, some vast conspiracy. Every country tries to get compromising material on powerful people, because people like the Clintons can't really be paid off because they have tons of money. I mean, they're corrupt as hell, but they have tons of money. The only thing they care about is their reputation. And so that's why, who knows what the reason is. And again, I'm not making any speculation here. I'm just saying it's very obvious that the reason why politicians are constantly holding water for this state isn't just, and again, I don't want to be reductive in the way that lots of people who are anti-imperialists on the left think. It's like, oh, it's because it's in the imperialist interest of the West. Of course it's in the imperialist interest of the West. We didn't need a vast Ukrainian lobby for them to be complete Russophobia weeks after NATO aggression and Russian aggression in Ukraine. There was full kind of ascension and hegemonic agreement that Russia bad, Ukraine good, let's go to war. You didn't need some big lobby to do that. So of course there's a kind of logic and interest that exists there. But there's also this massive institution it's so in their existential interest to buy off politicians and gather compromat material and and ensure that they have state capture in Britain, specifically in America, but also Britain and Germany.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting point you made about Israel being scared of the right over the left. I mean, first of all, it's true. The left doesn't really have any institutional power. So who's going to be scared of the left? In terms of the right, though, it's not scared that the right are going to come after them, it's that they're going to lose their support base. Because obviously, I mean, you've kind of got two factions within the far right. You've got those that are just like the sort of neo-Nazis who just hate Israel because of Jews. But then you've got the other part of the far right who want to emulate Israel because of apartheid. I mean, those sorts of arguments are trying to be brought over here. They want an ethno state over here, just like Israel. It's not that this is what Jewish people, by the way, but that's the way they operate.
I mean, I would kind of maybe disagree with that in the sense that like I don't think it's that okay. So it's like I think there are elements of what you said, of course, but then there are people who are like our country. There's a libertarian streak of the right that says we shouldn't be giving money to any country, and they've always opposed war. And this is people like Tucker Carlson. I think comes from maybe a little bit more from that tradition now. And I also think there's people who think that yes, they think it's about Jews, and I think certainly Nick Fuentes thinks that. But I think that it's also that there was this idea on the left that said the only way you can fight racism abroad is to fight racism at home. This is a line that was said. With Tony Blair, yeah, they're like Sure Start programs and DEI, blah, blah, blah. And he murders 1 million people. Obama, oh my God, Obama, he says he speaks in Arabic sometimes when he arrives in Cairo, and he doesn't say racist stuff. But then he deports the most migrants in American history and like murders tens of thousands of people from death machines in the sky. But then you get someone like from the right, and lots of these people on the right, very fascistic at home domestically, but globally don't want to murder anyone. Right? They don't want any wars. It's not just Israel's wars. They don't want any wars. So that's not me saying this is good. I just think at all, but I'm saying it's certainly good if you oppose war. And for me, the most important thing, the biggest force in the world for death, misery, and miseration in the world is the U.S. empire. And so anything that helps erode that, yes, it's bad. Violent deportations, terrible. Of course. Like the Muslim ban. Obama did the Muslim ban in 2010. It was just expanded by 4 countries. It was 10 countries in Obama. It was expanded by 4 countries in Trump, and it was called the Muslim ban. Like, like even with deportations, Biden deported twice as many people as Trump did. Twice as many people as Trump did. He just didn't say, I hate Mexicans and blah, blah, blah. This isn't me trying to reduce Trump is terrible, but and obviously what he's doing now is awful. But the point is that there's a faction of the right there that means that the actions that he's doing, it's tearing apart the base. It's tearing it apart. The base hates Trump. Yes, he's doing okay in the polls right now, but that doesn't really matter because once the actual election happens, you need the base, which mobilizes people and organizes people. It's not just this like zero-sum. That's why the base matters so much. So with Zohar Mamdani is just a perfect example. People might not have known who he was and have a strong opinion about it, but because he built such a strong cadre of volunteers and organizers, and he'd mobilized the base, he was able to expand that and build on it. And so Trump needs a strong base. And if his base collapses, it becomes very difficult for a future. And that's why there's this idea, especially around the right, if you follow the right, which I follow the right, like because I'm interested in them, where they say, oh, this is a way of getting Vance in, JD Vance, the VP, who's like basically this hand-selected person of lots of different people, like Silicon Valley types, and it just won't happen. It's like the base is collapsing, especially around the Epstein stuff, especially with the war in Iran, especially because yesterday it's the thing that was all over right-wing Twitter is that Trump has come out and said if you're in any state and you support BDS, you won't get any FEMA funding. This is funding for hurricane relief or whatever. And the right is exploding around this. And so these tensions it's an existential crisis for Israel. It's not good politics. It's actually objectively in lots of ways, especially on domestic issues, bad. But on the question of Israel, it's actually positive in eroding a crucial support that Israel needs to survive.
I mean, I think there's the Epstein stuff is the one that's really destroying his base, because I think when it came to the rhetoric around anti-war, there was too many of the base who were still pro-war, despite the fact that they pretended they weren't. I mean, you had Charlie Kirk, for example, and he'd be saying, "Oh my God, not Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris is going to keep on the forever wars, vote for Trump, and they're going to be the most peaceful cabinet." As soon as he bombed Iran,
I mean,
they
Charlie
didn't
Kirk is
care.
definitely someone who is far more. He's less MAGA, more institutionally Republican. I think. I mean, these distinctions are rather different, but they are he's chairing the event at CPAC. This is like a right wing convention. He's not one of the people speaking at it. You know what I mean? There's event. He's like much more 1 foot out, 1 foot in the institutions. The people that speak to the base are much more the Tuckers, the Candaces, the Nick Fuenteses, right? And so again, hugely reactionary, especially Nick Fuentes, but very charismatic, has a massive base, and is very hostile towards Israel. So it's the Epstein stuff. You're absolutely right. Epstein stuff is like the perfect combination of state capture in the minds of the right, but also I think there's a lot of evidence for this. State capture of a foreign entity of America, and elitist pedophile rings in which the right and the left, like Hillary Clinton, oh no, Bill Clinton, are coming together to go to some island. I mean, it's like this is just it's like everything's coming together. I mean, basically, loads of right wing conspiracists have been saying this for decades, and it's all come just so crystallized. And Trump runs on releasing the files. He's like, "We got to release the files. We got to release them." He comes in, he's like, he just says this 3 weeks ago. They're like, Epstein? You got to get over this Epstein. That guy's been dead for ages. Man, literally, Epstein was like, this is my best friend for 10 years, you know? So it's very, 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 it's literally like a sulfuric acid to the MAGA base. And that's good in so many ways. It collapses the right, because the point of the left winning is also, we need the right to collapse, obviously. But then also what it does is it makes Israel and anything associated with Israel, and that's what this is, to some extent. It's pedophilia, obviously, but then it's also, and it's sex trafficking, but it's also, and it's powerful people doing sex trafficking, but it's also state capture by Israel and compromat. And it's just like, it's so seedy in every way. And it's that makes it such a liability that increasingly it'll be the case that, I mean, look, the fact that Bernie was able to get 25 U.S. senators out of 100, 25 to sign on. People like Klobuchar from Minnesota, terrible politician, signed on to stop giving giving arms and funding to Israel. I mean, that's unimaginable a couple years ago.
I want to bring this back to Lindsay Hoyle a second, because I think this collective agreement of candidates not standing in the speaker seat has to go. I mean, he's supposed to be impartial. Evidently, he isn't. So maybe we could see someone from the Corbyn Sultana party stand, if they're ready, by the next general election.
Let's say, imagine it happens in 2026, right? We're not set up enough. We get 5 or 6 seats, 7 seats, with the independents, 10 seats, potentially. I think that's very possible. If that happens, especially if we get an agreement with the Greens, if that happens, we still become marginalized. And then it becomes reform is dominant, and the opposition party to that still remains Labor. And so then it becomes, when election time comes in 2030 or 2031 or whatever, it's like, oh my God, we have to get reform out because he said some bad things, even though Labor's immigration policy is exactly what reform would have done or will have done. So it's like, obviously reform's terrible, but I'm just saying this will just be like, okay, so everybody's going to push center, just like we saw with Berlusconi, what we see with Trump. Instead, if we build capacity, it gets to 2029, and then let's say we build enough and we get our shit together and we like have an agreement or whatever. Let's say we have 40, 50 seats. Greens get another 5, 6, 7 seats. Then you got Plaid Cymru, you get SNP with 10 seats, Plaid Cymru with 4 or 5 seats. You're talking 65, 70 people. That's capacity, right? That's significant capacity. And because in this country, the Labour Party's politicians are chosen in smoky back rooms on how many asses someone can kiss, not on how charismatic someone is, not how someone can speak. You know that Indian guy, like this guy with a beard, who like gave the like lamest speech, his maiden speech, and he was like, it was so lame, it was so boring. He gave this boring speech, and then when he wrote his thing, he was like, #no notes, and I'm like, yo, bro, that Chat GPT speech, like, why would you need notes for that? You sound like an Autobot. But all these people sound like this because it's about how many palms you greased, and how much ass you kissed. And I don't know if you can curse on this show. I don't know. Can you?
You
Oh my
can
god,
absolutely, you
I'm gonna go
can.
crazy.
Free reign.
So because of that, if you have 70 people who have like some real principles, some charisma, some ability, you'll make the Labour Party look like absolute losers, and then it'll be taken over by Wes Streeting, who looks like an animated Victorian doll, and has no. They'll try to present him as some like, oh my god, voice of the working class. No one's buying it. No one's buying it. At least Rayner, she has a little bit of like, she's got a little bit of like, she's got some style. She's got like some like street cred. Um,
I mean,
she's
she
got
has
something
something.
going on. I mean, I can't
She has
stand her,
something
but she's
about
got
her.
something going
Yeah.
on. She doesn't stand for anything, whatever. I know
Yeah.
that, but she's got something going for her like that. Wes Streeting, he's like a wooden Victorian doll. His face is like just plastic. So no one's buying it. Every one of his people, it's going to be completely. I mean, I remember Wes Streeting. I was running basically the LSE Students Union when he was president of the National Union of Students, and he had just like he just built sycophants around him. So at that time, if that happens, then I don't know if we could get a speaker out of it. But if the conditions are right, I mean, in a negotiation, let's say that this coalition of parties are negotiating power. I certainly don't think we should be negotiating for speaker. I think the things that we should be prioritizing obviously are things like putting PR, like, I don't know how long the show goes for, but I'll just say this. People should read this if you haven't read it. There's a 1963 pamphlet by a French Trotskyist named André Gorz called Strategy for Labor. And Strategy for Labor is just talking about, it's trying to intervene in the debate between reformism and revolutionary politics, right? And they're saying there are reforms that you can introduce that fundamentally transform capitalist relations. And those are the things that we need to focus on. How do we get people, it's like when the Bolsheviks ran their election, it was bread and peace. It's that you meet people's needs, but you also try to transform society. So it's like things like potentially PR, but also things that decommodify the essentials of society, right? Things that will be very difficult for them to take away once it's given, right? So like universal policies, not means testing, policies that are like universal basic services. Those are things that we should prioritize. And I think we should make it policy that if there's any negotiations, if we become part of a coalition, let's imagine, that nobody gets any, like, look at what the Lib Dems did. Lib Dems ran free education 2010, free education against Trident, pro-migrant, like basically what the Greens are running now, right? But the Greens are much better, don't get me wrong, because they have good people that are going to take it over. But they are, when it came to negotiations, they got some ministerial roles, 5p bags and like AV vote that was gonna that lost, right? So in any kind of negotiations, I don't think these kinds of positions. I'm not saying you're saying that. I know you're just using that as a way to discuss this. It shouldn't really. Ministerial roles should be secondary to agreements on policies that transform society. Ministerial roles, they can be kicked out anytime, and they're basically factotums. They're like cogs in a machine for whoever's running the party.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.